The West is increasingly divided over the question of whether to continue transferring heavy weapons to help Ukraine and Russia early in the current conflict. At the heart of any coin is the growing awareness in the West of the long-term threat from Moscow and the question of whether the Ukrainian documents are actually strong enough against Russia on the battlefield. According to reports, limit has been set. One faction, led by France and Germany, is increasingly out of hand in supplying Ukraine with the long-range offensive weapons that Kiev claims is necessary to hand over pieces of territory from Russian forces there. East and south of the country. Neither Paris nor Berlin fear that the transfer of such heavy weapons could anger Moscow and risk a direct trigger between Russia and NATO. Behind, including the US, UK and major groups of countries in Central and Northern Europe, see Russia's military campaign as a sign that Moscow wants to expand its influence. They believe that Ukraine is the main battleground in the larger confrontation between the West and Russia. Disagreements between the two groups have become increasingly apparent in recent weeks, especially at the European Union (EU) summit over the conflict in Ukraine, according to knowledgeable European organizations, took place last week. In the context of the country's army constantly having to retreat before the Russian advances in a number of matches in the Donbass. After the conference, the EU still reached an agreement on a sixth round of sanctions with Moscow, including banning the import of most Russian crude oil. But on Ukraine, the views of the parties are still very divided. The statements of the leaders of France and Germany and the comments of the officials of the two countries show that there is a possibility that Ukraine can push Russian forces out of the territory. Berlin and Paris have called on Kiev to accept negotiations with Russia. This increased output must receive Ukrainian homogeneity, as officials in Kiev argue that France and Germany are pressing Ukraine to seize territory for a peaceful time transition. Some Western European countries do not want to prolong wars they cannot win and deplete Europe's resources, exacerbating the dangers of traditional thinking. Meanwhile, the leaders of the Baltic states, Poland and a number of other countries said that supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine is an important task that not only keeps the course but can also reverse the process. Russian army. They argue that with weapons provided by the West, Ukraine can deal a decisive blow, making it impossible for Russia to launch any military operations in the future. This strategic military company is one that has never targeted Ukraine, said Artis Pabriks, the Baltic country's defense minister. He believes that this is a premise for Russia to expand its influence in Europe. Poland and the Baltic states fear that if they don't stop Russia in Ukraine, they will become the next battleground in the future. Millions of Ukrainians have flocked to these countries, feeling the conflict closer to the lives of ordinary people here, while with Germany, Austria or Italy, the constitutive element of the price increase.